All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blue Star Rising, the Templar Awakening. Michael Henry Dunn here with, of course, my good friend, Reverend Maia Nartoomid. And good day to you, Maia. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day here in the mountains of Colorado, and we're on Thanksgiving weekend. And this sharing that we're going to bring to you today is on the Terran Lux grid and the Black Madonna. And I know I often say this. In fact, I say this almost every time. But ladies and gentlemen, this one, oh my goodness, is so profound and deep. I'm going to say it again because this one particularly moved me and has a great deal of richness and many levels to it. And so, Maia, do you want to just give a little quick overview before we share the video? It's 22 minutes long, very engrossing, and of course, as always, beautifully enriched with Maia's graphic art. So do you want to give us a little brief overview before we share the video?
Well, it was prompted many years ago. I mean, the video is current. I just made it, but it was prompted by a sacred journey that my former husband Simeon and I took, which we facilitated for many people. We had about, I don't remember how many on that journey, maybe 12 or 13 people. And at least it was at the beginning of the journey. We went to Scotland, England, and then a smaller group of us went to Montserrat, Spain, and then to Lourdes, France. And these were specific points that Thoth wanted us to go to. So, you know, it's not like a regular tour where you just take in the sights and you go everywhere. The two sacred journeys we did were guided by Thoth, the one to Egypt, and which went eventually for a smaller group to the Sinai, and then even over to Jordan and Jerusalem. But, and then this one that we did in 1998, 97, then 98. And the 98 one is called the Grail Journey, the Grail Journey. And so I wrote about it just a few months later, which turned out to be 1999 by then. And so I'm reading from that, but of course I'm also making commentary. It brings it up to the current. But it's timeless. You know, it's timeless. It has to do with this very special grid on the planet that Thoth is calling the Terran Lux. And it also has to do with our, you know, the Black Madonna, which we experienced on our journey. And I mentioned that. Now, in the actual article, it is longer than the video here because I talk about each of the places that we went. But I didn't go into that on this video. I wanted to make it a little more concise and stick to the core subject of the Terran Lux grid. So that's what I did. And then, of course, just recently, a few weeks ago, maybe a week ago, I made the video on it as well.
Well, it's, to me, so applicable what it offers us to what we're going through today, and how this very powerful divine feminine grid can be activated and strengthened at this time. So with that, we will now share with you this 22-minute video on the Terran Lux and the Black Madonna, and then we join you to share and explore. I really encourage you to stick around for the full video and the exploration, because this is a very rich one, and we'll be with you immediately afterwards.
I will be reading from and commenting on an article I wrote in 1999 after our Sacred Grail journey, which Simeon and I facilitated to Scotland, England, and then a smaller group on to Montserrat, Spain, and then to Lourdes, France. The mystery of the Black Madonna, or Dark Virgin, has been with us historically for many centuries. These statues and figures have been found in various spiritual religious centers throughout the world, and it is conjectured that their meaning predates Christianity. Mythic writers and historians have followed the thread of the Dark Virgin back into the ancient pagan era, when she represented the goddess at the center of the earth. She was called Kore, K-O-R-E, by some ancients, an underworld guardian of the inner sanctum. The record of Thoth agrees with this, revealing further that the original Black Madonnas were spiritually imbued with healing and transformative energies to aid humanity in releasing its broken bonds with the earth. In early Christian times, she became the veiled or dark mother, carrying upon her earthen lap the Sun King, child of her union with the cosmic divine. Thoth has revealed a specific earth grid, which he calls the Terran Lux, or midnight, interior earth, sun. It was installed by Melchizedek in an overlord function, not during his actual incarnation, but much later, around 5000 BC. This grid is composed of original sites where the Black Madonna statues were placed in order to summon the Lady of the Midnight Sun, the most ancient goddess who hailed from the center of the earth. These sacred nodes on the Terran Lux are powerful centers of concentrated creatrix or creational feminine energies. The creational realm is the first grail from which the earthen nature of the world developed. In order to bring the power of the universal template for our return to light into actualization within the earthen continuum, the creational realm of the beginning time must be brought forth and wedded with the present evolution of the earth. This creational realm can also be equated as Medusa, the goddess of the threshold. From the Woman's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets by Barbara G. Walker, Medusa is described as the serpent goddess of the Libyan Amazons, representing female wisdom. She was the destroyer aspect of the triple goddess called Nyeth in Egypt, Ashina or Athen in North Africa. Her inscription at Sais called her Mother of all gods, whom she bore before childbirth existed. She was past, present, and future, all that has been, that is, and that will be. I wish to pause here in the reading to comment that the persons that live in the inner earth are not seeing a black hole at their center or a white core. They are seeing an envelope of misty frequency, light, that is around all of that. And this I've explained in detail scientifically in other materials, so I won't do that here, what creates it. But it allows them to actually look at the sun in the inner earth directly. They don't have a problem with that. And there's such beautiful colors, and it's just really, in a way, indescribable. And it creates the aurora borealis type effects that come out of it, especially when it contracts during the latter part of its day, because it doesn't have a full night, of course. But there's a dimming of the light, and it allows these aurora streamings to come out of it. So there's a whole story around that. But I just wish to mention that they don't see a black core. To continue, other archetypal expressions which have a close similarity to the Black Madonna would be Asherah, Isis, Hera, also the most ancient Amazonian Hera, Kor, Magda, Mari, Ananin, and simply Anna, and Sophia. These are the major ones only. The Kali archetype also has a resonance with the Black Madonna. The primary similarity being that they both hold the primeval power of dissolution which precedes recreation. However, Kali is not as culturally and archetypally multifaceted as is the Black Madonna. The Black Madonna archetypes represent specific nodes on the goddess grid which incorporate cross-cultural consciousness codes that have come together into a coherent expression at specific points in time. There have been many holy orders involved in the continuing installation, maintenance, and perpetuation of the Terran Lux grid throughout history. The first were the Druids, after the original installation by Melchizedek as an overlord. Also involved were the Knights Templar, the Cathars, the Caldri, and to some extent the Culdees. Several pagan orders played their roles as well, such as the Ninan and the Kimel. Although the Kimel was pagan, many of its beliefs and practices influenced early Hebraic mystery work and religion. The place of the divine primal feminine energy in this latter instance was given the name of Asherah, which translates as a grove. Historically, Asherah is said to be the Semitic name for the great goddess, but through the record of Thoth, this name can be traced much further back in time, all the way to the Rutan Atlanteans. In the spiritual center of the surface Earth's Terran Lux grid is a tripole, or ilu, that's I-L-U, an ancient name meaning connective. The ilu holds a plane of connective energy and serves as a rotational field that adjusts energies in the grid before they interact with the central vault. The sacred geophysical sites on the Earth which form the tripole are Montserrat in Spain, Chartres in France, and Lourdes in France. The center vault is at Glastonbury Tor in England. This matrix functions as a pulsing, breathing energy moving from the outer nodes into the three-poled ilu, which then creates a spinning field around the center point. From the ilu, the energies are fed into the center at Glastonbury and then into the center of the planet to circulate back again into the outer nodes. At Montserrat, Chartres, and Lourdes, the Black Madonna statues are present. At Lourdes, her presence is in the form of two statues in the Lourdes New Parish Church. Both of these statues represent the Lady of Montserrat, one in an exact duplicate as witnessed by the inscriptions at the base. The record of Thoth reveals that these statues in Lourdes are rather recent additions, but in more ancient times an original Black Madonna statue was located there, having been eventually destroyed by those who superstitiously feared her presence in that past age. The central vault of the Terran Lux grid at Glastonbury Tor does not now contain, nor has it ever, a statue of the Black Madonna. Rather, this point is held by the suspended form of Torhana, who is the vibrational presence in semi-living flesh of the Black Madonna in the earth. Briefly, Torhana is an Egyptian Atlantean priestess whose body form lies suspended within the Tor in a dimension slightly removed from our own. Torhana lies sleeping in a crystal casket beneath the Tor, holding the veiled divine feminine presence in genetic form for the earth. As an Earth stellar dynamic, the Terran Lux Earth grid holds the pure light codes of primeval prima matra, which is not only original state inviolate matter, but also the vibration of the first and inviolate mother consciousness. This grid is essential for the retrieval of the planetary genius at the center of the Earth, which will be transported into the new Earth star at the ascension. As an earthen grail dynamic, the Terran Lux holds the codes for grail blood patterning within a pure earth energy context, from whence arises the Eve, Isis, Mari passage of the goddess, and thus the natural grail through the evolutionary movement of the feminine negative polarity in the earth. In other words, as an earthen grail dynamic, the Terran Lux grid is a medium for storage, updating, and transmission of pure grail genetic codes. As these codes go through the evolutionary movement necessary to bridge the alpha-omega points on the Earth, the development of the archetypal goddess as witnessed in the Eve-Isis-Mari progression are representative of the feminine negative polarity movement inherent in the overall planetary evolution. In fact, the two are very synergic because from the perspective we have assumed for the purposes of this article, the Grail genetic codes represent the true balance of feminine-masculine polarities. On the other hand, the primary faces of the archetypal goddess seek to maintain and restore that balance upon the earth. The consciousness represented in the Terran Lux grid originated as a result of specific souls whose sentient awareness triggered very deep primal memory fields within their communal timelines, going all the way back into the heart of their soul's beginnings with the current human race. These individuals' personal and tribal spiritual processes, dream time, shamanic, etc., served as the trigger mechanism for their deep primal memories. Ultimately, the consciousness mechanism of this grid is meant to revivify the blood consciousness of mankind through continuing revelation of the divine heart within matter. The primary factor which triggers or attenuates the dynamics of the Terran Lux grid at its various nodes upon the earth is the process of veneration, or awareness, levied by sentient souls at the various Terran Lux grid sites. Any points on the grid which no longer contain that veneration dynamic become dormant. In like manner, the ebb and flow of that sentient veneration can also alter the dynamics of any given point in the grid. Significantly, even comparatively modern Black Madonna statues can equally hold their charge within the grid. The active sentient veneration dynamic is much more relative to the power of any particular node than to the age, history, or origins of the statues at those locations. The Terran Lux grid is able to revivify the cosmic mother and sun-child within the Earth's experience once again through the creation of a pillar of resurrection in the heart-mind of all those who join the veneration dynamic themselves and are awakened by the intensity of the sacred presence at these Terran Lux sites. I would like to pause for a moment and comment on this, to say we're not speaking here of a religious thing, not a Catholic belief system, or even an ancient pagan belief system. This has to do with the dynamic further within the cosmic sense, the grand design of universal dynamics. And actually, quantum physics, it always comes back to that. However, religions have adopted the venerations in their own form, in their own belief systems. And this is not entirely negative at all. I mean, we have now, been oversaturated by religions, especially when they started killing people and doing things like that. But the dynamic of having a religious focus was really not a wrong intention. It served its purpose, but let's say it's been very overserved by now. However, looking back at the core essence of it, it does align people, bring them into some kind of continuity with the spiritual dynamic. All sites on the Terran Lux grid that contain Black Madonnas are currently being venerated. These are numerous. The book The Cult of the Black Virgin by Ian Begg, that's Eanbegg, lists thousands of them in the gazetteer at the back of the book. The few pages before the gazetteer have some maps of large sections of Europe pinpointing these locations. The current Yeshua Grail lineage links to the Black Madonna and the ancient rituals of the Melchizedekian order via the first Cathars. These Cathars were considered to be within the Johannine Church expression because they were actual descendants of St. John the Beloved. These descendants of St. John's resulted from his sacred marriage with Lucinda. She was a woman of Celtic, Hebraic, and Roman blood with Grail blood carried through her Celtic Hebraic lineage. A descendant under John and Lucinda married a descendant under Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, thus creating the Cathar branch of the family. Of course, not all followers of the Cathar religion were of this family bloodline, but those of the inner order were from the Delphanos branch of the Catharines, which were the direct descendants of St. John. It was thus fitting that the first Cathars from the Church of Johannine should become the guardians of both the Black Madonna statue of St. John and the Catharine branch of the Holy Family. The overall guardianship of this innermost Holy Family is under the Great Order of Zayn, but the Cathars were ordained through the Johannine Church to be the active agent of that guardianship. As an aside, Thoth has always stated to me that St. John the Beloved and St. John of Revelations are the same individual. One of the treasured relics taken from the Cathar stronghold of Monseigneur, France, just before its fall to the Inquisition, was a statue of the Christian Black Madonna crafted by St. John on the Isle of Patmos. It was a simple artwork, for John was not a skilled craftsman, but it was and is a venerated talisman empowered by St. John during his mystical trances, through which he imparted the book of Revelation. The Catharines still continue the rites and rituals of the Black Madonna, which are the Melchizedekian rituals of the Nether Goddess. These current-day Catharines are among us, but they do not make themselves known publicly. In conclusion, meditation with the Lady of the Midnight Sun. The Atlanteans referred to the jewels of the midnight sun. In the Atlantean mythos, these jewels were said to radiate out of the crown of the queen who veils the midnight sun. She is the aspect of the divine feminine that protects humanity's inner sight from the overwhelming power of spiritual beauty emanating from the innermost portal of transcendent spirit. It is through this portal that we may behold the multidimensional brilliance of the divine within us. The Veiled Lady allows us to gaze into the light unharmed until we are ready to receive the full illumination of the divine inner sun. The jewels of the Lady are found within her crown or aura and are 8 in number. They are identified with these earthen gemstones: the ruby or garnet, golden topaz, blue sapphire, emerald, moonstone, tourmaline, rose quartz, and diamond. However, bear in mind many other gems can substitute these in those frequencies. These are given here for us to be able to have some foundation for this meditation. Bring yourself into a deep meditative state, and then visualize these gemstones encircling your crown chakra, pouring a veil of holy light around and through the rest of the body from that point. Dive into your deepest point of inner knowing, where you perceive this veil to be light which is filtered through the veil of the Lady of the Midnight Sun, as she adjusts the frequency in an act of compassion and grace to that which you are ready and able to receive in the current moment. As this veiled light streams into your being, call upon the Lady of the Midnight Sun to reveal her presence to you in a unique and personal interface with your soul. Beckon to her sacred purpose to serve yours. Open and receive. And so it is.
All right, welcome back. So the most powerful element of this, and there's so many that really hit home for me, Maya, the fact that I wrote it down: active sentient veneration dynamic can awaken dormant points on the Terran Lux grid, where this Black Madonna dynamic of, the cosmic mother and son child, S-U-N, S-O-N as well, that is, it's cosmic, it's universal. As you point out, it is not particular to any one religion. It's not Christian, it's not Catholic. It goes as far back in time as time itself goes. And this is particularly moving to me personally because devotion and devotional music and song, I have experienced this dynamic that you're describing here about how, when offered from the heart, that at a sacred place, there are these places where there is, it's either accumulated over the centuries through the focused devotion of human hearts, or it's also, telluric energies, ley line energies that form a powerful nexus at a given place. And I know this to be true. I've experienced, the sacred science that you're describing here. So in beginning our exploration here, maybe we can just touch on the ways in which this is a cosmic dynamic, the ways in which, this is truly the universal mother, the universal son, Christ child, you can call if you want. I want to just share briefly, there is a quotation from the wonderful commentary on the Gospels by Paramahansa Yogananda, which is called The Second Coming of Christ, the Resurrection of the Christ Within You. And he actually comments on the ways in which the Virgin Mary, as understood in Christianity, particularly Catholic Christianity, corresponds to a universal dynamic. I'll just read this here. This is from Discourse 2 in the first volume. There is a cosmic metaphysical symbolism in the wondrous conception and birth of Jesus. His incarnate Christ consciousness came immaculately through the Virgin Mary. Likewise, the universal Christ intelligence was born or reflected in the cosmic body of pure vibratory creation, the cosmic Virgin Mary, through the instrumentality of God the Father. The Holy Ghost cosmic vibration, Om Mahaprakriti, is analogous to the cosmic Virgin Mary because it is thus the mother of the immanent universal Christ intelligence, the Son of God and of all created objects. So that, lifts all of this out of, out of a Catholic context, as far as I'm concerned, and I'd love to have you elaborate on that. The Yogananda also says in this passage that many saints, were born through the natural sanctified sexuality conception of humanity, and there is also, because nothing is limited to God, goddess, occasionally done through the pure manifesting power of the soul.
Yes.
So anyway, with that somewhat lengthy, I know, introduction, you want to comment?
Yeah. Well, I sort of reached up and I saw a comet coming from a higher firmament, like a firmament, I guess,
Firmament.
That's the word. Down through the ethers, and it was coming very slowly, like in slow motion, not like a real comet. This was, metaphorically inspired one. And I saw these flames coming out of the back of it. And as it was entering different layers of environment, as it's approached the earth, the flames changed color. But very specifically, again, this was symbolic. So it wasn't just like a science thing. It was symbolic. So it would be like yellow, then orange, then pink, then, it was going through these different colors. And then it went down and it went into the earth. It didn't crash into the earth. It just, smoothly went into the earth, into the center of the earth. And as it did, it became this white fire. And then it went coalesced into this black, what Thoth calls the black light. You could call it just black, but it has more vibrancy than that. So what does this mean in regard to your question you were asking? Well, it was showing how the divine feminine, we see the masculine as the insemination, the feminine as the receptacle for birth. But from the cosmic perspective, the divine feminine can also be an insemination, because it inseminates the womb of a planetary being. So it's feminine, but it's self-conceiving, I know it kind of seems like it leaves Gaia out of the picture, but this is man and woman stuff. This is universal. So it's really assuming a masculine, what you call a positive polarity, as it moves into these frequencies. And then it becomes the feminine again as it receives its own insemination. And so from that perspective, we're just speaking now of a very universal experience. And from that aspect, it's like there is no limitation on the divine experience. Whether it's, male, female is just a means to an end, but the actual omnipotence of the divine finds ways to bring itself into a full birth by opening the portals of the stars and bringing that energy forward. So it doesn't have to say, oh, here I am, the divine feminine, but I'm looking for a masculine polarity so I can give birth. It's just saying all is one. I am the divine feminine, but hey, I'm also the divine masculine. And I'm bringing this energy together, I'm coalescing it, and I'm giving forth the divine sunshine. So when we think of the cosmic virgin, we have to include that she is bipolar. She has that other frequency within her to be her own consort,
Right. The Mahaprakriti, particularly as illustrated in a wonderful illustration, which I will drop in here, hopefully, shows how, in the Hindu iconography, Mahaprakriti contains within herself the Hindu trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Brahma, the creator; Vishnu, the preserver; Shiva, the destroyer, renewer. And I love that dynamic that you're bringing out there, because it's so easy these days for us to fall prey to the divisiveness of pitting genders against each other, and we're in this cosmic universal dynamic here. So I want to just move on to the core message and purpose that's being brought out here. You talk about the goddess at the center of the earth, the guardian and inner soul, and that the primary dynamic and purpose of the Terran Lux grid, which literally means earth light, right? Healing and transformative energies to release our broken bonds with the earth. And that the Black Madonna specifically transcends Christianity, predates Christianity, and there's this veiled mother carrying the Sun King, the sun of the sky, and the sun as a masculine child. So this idea of there being a midnight sun of the inner earth, and that the grid of the Terran Lux is somehow connected to this and can be activating through this active sentient veneration, essentially love of the Divine
Yes,
Mother, expressed love in prayer and chanting and heart-focused devotion at these sacred places. And of course, you can create a sacred place in your own home, but these pilgrimage points around the earth, which you mentioned as being brought forward in the book, and that there's more than 1,000 of them. I've been to such points, and have experienced this. So do you want to just start to comment a little bit on what you see as the core purpose of this being brought out at this time of the Terran Lux, the true nature of the Black Madonna, and how all of our viewers can perhaps apply this to strengthen and light up that divine presence in our hearts through veneration?
exactly. Well, there's so much to say here, and I don't know that I even have the words to say it, but of course, we're dealing on the planet right now with an attempted takeover by the archonic forces, like it hasn't been in a long, long time, certainly not in known civilization. We've seen many horrible things happen on this planet as human beings, back, of course, World War II and all of the prison camps and all of that horrible stuff. But go back further, Attila the Hun. And I mean, there's been awful stuff that's been going on for a long time. And just regular, they used to, in the olden days, I mean, they just took that for granted. Oh, yes, my mother and my father were all decapitated in the so-and-so war. I mean, it was just like, these things just happen all the time till people just became oversaturated with it and thought, well, that's the way it is. That's how we live. And yet, the difference between then and now, I mean, now doesn't seem that bad, but actually it really is if you take it on a dimensional picture of the whole thing. The difference is that then we were much, much further away from what Thoth calls LP40, or the ascension principle, where we move from a world system 1 to a world system 2 in consciousness, energy, and indeed even in physical substance. If we're to believe that, that's what I received. And we're so much closer to it now. When I say closer, I don't mean, well, tomorrow, anything, but we just don't know. They say no one knows the hour but God, or something like that in the Bible. We just don't know. But we're so much closer to it that all of the energies that are impelling the dark forces to lay waste to our spiritual senses and being, they don't have much time left to consume this planet for their own purposes. And I know I sound almost like a Baptist preacher. We're all going to hell if we don't accept Jesus. I'm not into that space. Believe me, I'm not talking that way. But what I'm saying is, from a very quantum physics perspective, which is divine, of course, they just don't have much time. And what do they want this planet for? Well, it's like asking a virus what it wants to take over a body for. That's it. That's its life. That's its substance. That's its being. That's its expression. It knows nothing else. And it's the same thing with what we're calling right now. We could call it a lot of things, the archonic forces. And but archonic forces tend to co-opt souls that have agendas that they would like to see fulfilled. So they co-opt souls that are, they've been around the block with really negative stuff, and they have not yet released that, and they're really saturated with it. So the archonic force can just move in and say, hey, I got a deal for you. You help out here and look what you're going to get from it. Of course, I'm speaking facetiously. It's not a talk. Thoth speaks of the archons as actually a cloud, a virus cloud in the universe. But it attaches itself to souls, and it animates those souls if they become what Thoth calls archonically invested. Now, you and I are all, all of us are influenced to some degree from the archonic frequency. We can't say, oh, well, we aren't involved. Of course we are. We're living here, But archonic investiture is something much worse. That's when a soul is just almost entirely consumed by it. Their ever thought, breathing moment is saying, how can I serve the archonic virus within me? It's hungry. I got to feed it. And so all of these things are setting upon us now, and because we're so close to receiving such a great amount of light on this planet, that's what makes the difference between then and all the awful stuff that was going on then and now. That said, we are tapping the spiritual selves of our beings, are tapping deeper into the divine font, the flow. We may not recognize it in our everyday lives, but if you're listening to this program, we know you have a spiritual dedication of some kind. And I know that you're feeling it. You're feeling a difference now in the whole environment that we live in, not just the negative stuff, but the immense amount of light that's just, coming in on around the edges, waiting to come in and to embrace us. And so this is the time to work with the heart-centered consciousness. And what better way than to take a look at and be thoughtful of, and perhaps even connect more fully to this greater divine feminine. By that I mean, everything is dimensional. And there's, just accepting Gaia and the mother, and, we have all the gods and goddesses of the ancient times that represent spiritual forces of her being. All this is beautiful. But what's being called upon now is to go deep. And the deeper you go, you're going deep into the earth. Thotha said, if you want to reach the stars, you go through the center of the earth. I mean, because you're going into the sacred chamber that resonates, that's full of starlight. It connects us as a being. Gaia and us are all one being to the stars. We don't say, bye, Gaia, I'm going to go over there to Mars and check that out, or I'm going to go fly over the Pleiades because my soul's from there. All of this. Yes, but you have to go through your mother principle to truly get there. You have to embrace her. And this is not about, any particular goddess or even, Gaia herself as a mystical presence. All of these things are wonderful, but to go deeper, you have to shed all the preconceived ideas and belief systems. When I say shed them, I don't mean turn your back on them. There's good in all of those things. Shedding means, yes, it's there, you recognize it, but you become your own being. You become your own center of light, and you enter Gaia naked and receptive. And the Black Madonna, you see, represents the midnight sun. And the midnight sun is a lot of things, but it's primarily from our Gaia-centric perspective. It's the core, the center, the divine center of this planet, which Thoth calls the sacred sun Atoma. And it is veiled. It is veiled by the clouds around it that come and go for the people in the sacred hollow. They look at the sun and they see, these diffusive clouds that sort of get a little bit darker and a little bit lighter. They don't see a black core. They don't see a blinding light. They don't see any of that. She is veiled. Black Madonna, she's veiled. And she offers the inner earth beings, persons, this receptive, close-up encounter with her heart, that they can actually look directly at the sun in the inner earth. They don't have to look away like we do. Now, if you take it to another level, the Black Madonna, or the Black Virgin, represents, and it is the form of the midnight sun. The midnight sun is also representative of the final hour when we move through the portal, the 4444 Stargate, as Thoth calls it. You can call it anything you want, but that's what he chose, and receive the new earth star, the star of presence within you. So the midnight sun also represents that moment when everything gets dark before the light. And this kind of darkness is not the evil forces coming in and trying to veil the eyes. We kind of having some of that going on now, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's the darkness before the light is really that moment of bringing yourself into the sacred nothing, when I was, let's see, it was been in 1974 or 5, I received from, from the Thoth Akasha. I really wasn't even communicating directly with the Thoth yet, but with the beings that were helping me, the Star Kindred. But I received a book. It's in manuscript form, and now it's been digitalized, and it's in the vault. And it was called The Book of I. And it was 2 little I's. That's the way it was expressed in English. I. It's 2 little I's, I. And this is an ancient, very kind of difficult to understand little book, but it talks about the sacred nothing. And the sacred nothing is that divine place where you must be prepared to be before you can enter the fullness of divine presence. And that's what, when people meditate, especially the deeper meditations, the monks and and the hermits in the caves, that doesn't mean we have to be that way. And it doesn't mean we have to, thank God, meditate a lot, because I can't do it. but it does, but that certainly is good. It helps to do that. But what it does mean, you can get there by being saturated with your own spiritual consciousness, however you find a way to do that. It's like that's where that moment resides, where you have to turn loose of everything busy and all your concepts and all your spiritual belief systems. Not that that's anything wrong. Everything can be true in your experience. You still have to turn it loose so that you can get into that center. Now, Thoth says it's not expected that we all, oh my God, Maia said, and Thoth said, I better go try to find that center. No. This is something that comes organically when you move toward your path of light, when you're on that path of light. And it comes in unexpected ways, and maybe it comes in increments to you. Instead of bam, you're there. We're very delicate beings. We're these divine souls, but yet we're in these little fragile bodies, and we're on a planet that has a very specific agenda and purpose. I'm sure they all do, but I'm talking about this Earth here. It's very unique in a way. And it's sitting on a node in the universe, according to Thoth, that is a very powerful node. And that's why we have so many visitations from the good, the bad, and the ugly. We get all these different souls coming, the guys that want to haul us off and do experiments on us, and the angelic beings, and all of these, because we're on this node that is so enticing and inviting to the negative, and it's so illuminating to the positive. And yet here we sit, and we don't really know what we're sitting on. It's kind of like we're this, this mother hen, and we're sitting on this golden egg, and she's going, I wish I had an egg. I'd really like to have an egg to sit on. I'm just sitting here, but I don't have any egg. And yet she's sitting on a golden egg, and she doesn't even know it, So that's what we're doing on this planet. And we're having to work through all of this to come to the notice of the golden egg that we've been harboring. And we've really been, for the most part, we've been good little mother hen, even though we don't know we have an egg. So I get silly sometimes, I'm sorry. But anyway, so we're getting to a point here where things like, understanding and recognizing the veiled goddess of the Black Madonna, the Virgin, or whatever you want to call her, the divine midnight sun in our midst, in the center of the earth. Talk about a golden egg. Thoth refers to it a lot of times as the golden rose in the center of the earth. That's the egg we're sitting on too, and it's connected directly to the node of this special node in the universe that I don't know a whole lot about at this point, admittedly. So all of these ways that we have to go deeper are coming forward now. And I believe that's why Thoth prompted me to do the Terran Lux video right now. I did do one previously for the portal, but it was just reading off some stuff, and I didn't do a real video, This time he wanted me to do this. He wanted it to be inspiring enough that people could connect to their midnight sun, to that part of their being where the sacred nothing abides. And we can do it in ways that are comfortable to us. We will eventually get there to the big way, but you don't pull on the chutes, you just take it a step at a time. But just bringing this into the field of consciousness, my sharing it here, and I'm going to be sharing just the video itself on my website. And it allows people to have a moment experiencing that on some level. So.
Yeah, so there is, as I hope you all saw at the end of the video we shared with you, a specific meditation, a guided meditation that Maia created. And I know, you just shared that for you, meditation is not a focus. It's something that, because of all the material that has come through the Thothic stream for you over the course of your life, this particular lifetime for you was not about meditation. I mean, I have a hunch that you have plenty of past lives where you were meditating very deeply for years, but that's just my private opinion.
Well,
But
probably so. I know one in which I was praying a lot.
right. Well, I think that if for whatever reason the stream, had a little cessation for you, and then, well, maybe I'll try to learn to meditate after all, we'd probably be peeling you off the ceiling, rather shorter, was my personal opinion. But, certainly all the different ways of meditation, and there are many beautiful meditative paths, most of them have in common, watching the breath, watching the thoughts, letting go of the thoughts as they arise so that you can experience the pure awareness of the soul. And that little by little, as you say, there are, gradations of progress that we almost don't notice. Paramahansa Yogananda says in his teachings that, a lot of beginners on the spiritual path who start to practice a meditation technique will not even notice or recognize or validate these first indications of the divine presence as peace. As you let go of the thoughts, the breath slows down, the heartbeat slows down. You're watching the breath, thoughts come in, you let them go. And then there are these intervals of pure awareness and peace. It says, this is the first sign of the divine presence. Don't underestimate it. So, and then to reach this point, I was particularly fascinated by this, this point of nothing, this sacred nothing. The dark night of the soul, as it's called in some meditation traditions, where you have to be in this place of falling away, as you say, of all of our structures and belief systems and earthly realities, such that then we can move into the presence of the divine in union. I'm reminded of a story of one of the disciples coming to Yogananda and saying, well, why is Divine Mother doing this particular thing, Guruji? With, he was working out some karma of some of his disciples in his own form, and he was, his body was suffering. And, why is Divine Mother doing this? And Yogananda, who was ordinarily gentle, became very fiery with her and said, never question Divine Mother. First become Divine Mother. Then you will know. Right? So to become Divine Mother, to have that union, everything needs to fall away. There needs to be this dark night of the soul. And I think it's beautifully expressed. This midnight sun concept is symbolically very rich. As you say, on one level, it's what souls in the inner earth are experiencing. On another level, it is symbolic of that moment of sacred nothing, of the midnight that we move into before we are bathed in the divine sun. So, wow, there's so much that you talk about various forms of the Black Madonna back through history, and you bring in the Sumerian, and you bring in Medusa, who is ordinarily depicted like, oh, she had snakes for hair, and if you looked in her eyes, you were dead. Well, there's of course a much deeper symbology of the sacredness of the serpent.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned Isis and Hera and Magda and Mari and Anna and Sophia, and how the Kali archetype of, the fierce mother protectress with the belt made of human skulls, that this is a somewhat less flexible symbology in terms of its cultural adaptability. Certainly one that is very revered. So when we talk about specific nodes, I'd love to get into specific nodes on the Terran Lux grid, in terms of the places, the actual location. You mentioned Montserrat in Spain, Lourdes in France, and then the very powerful reality of the soul of Torhana being in suspended animation in a trans-dimensional state at Glastonbury beneath the Tor. And that is such a, that this is a sort of divine anchor for these sacred genetics. I'm trying to re-express it in a way because it hasn't entirely landed with me. Can you go into that a little bit about the function of Torhana in this trans-dimensional state at Glastonbury?
Right. First of all, I also, just before I made the Terran Lux video, I made my video on Torhana. So I will ask Michael to supply a link to that video as well below. So we'll give you more information. But Torhana, I'm trying to remember when I was first made aware of her. I think it was actually in the 1970s, but I really didn't get into it big time more until the 1980s. But according to Thoth, she was an Egyptian princess who had to leave with her people very quickly because she was from the Hyksos. And the Hyksos which were the shepherd kings, they were being, the last of them were being taken out by the negative forces at that time. It's a long story about the Hyksos, but if you read about them, you'll probably think, oh, well, they were the bad guys. They were the invaders, because all the walls, the Egyptians are carving, oh, the invaders, here they are. But we beat them out, man. We really got them out of town, man. But no, according to Thoth, the Hyksos were the true guardians, the true spiritual guardians. And they left a group of persons in charge of their domain while they went off and did something. I don't know what they did. I can't remember. It's too long ago. But anyway, when they came back and said, okay, we're back. And they said, well, we decided we like it here. We're not going to give it back to you. And so that's where all that came out. So the Hyksos finally said, look, we're not a warring people. We've been skirmishing with you here, but we're going to leave. You can just have it. We're going. Karma will take care of you. However, later, some of the Hyksos came back. Let's say the shepherd kings and queens came back in. That's what Thoth calls them. And I don't know how exactly that happened, because it wasn't like an invasion or anything. But they came back and they managed to get on the thrones. And then eventually the other guys said, no, we don't like this. And they started killing them off. And so back to Torhana. Her name is much as I give in my video. It's not Torhana. It's something I can't pronounce. Thoth takes mercy on me with my dyslexia, and he gives me simpler versions of the name. Maybe they were used at some time. I don't know. But anyway, we're calling her Torhana. So she managed to escape with the sacred relics and with her bloodline intact, which is a sacred bloodline. Now, again, when we're talking about bloodlines, that in truth, we're not talking about exclusiveness. We're talking about energies in the DNA and the blood that can be released to the whole planet. And that's what, through paragenetics. And that's what Torhana and her people knew about. So they weren't like, oh, my bloodline. It was like, no, they were preserving a bloodline for all humanity. So she went to Glastonbury. How that place was chosen, and it wasn't Glastonbury at the time, but that location. And so, according to Thoth, her soul would later incarnate as Mary, the mother of Yeshua. And so there's a whole story around that. I won't get into it. You can listen to my video. But when she left the body, she actually went to sleep in the sarcophagus. And yes, her soul went on to do things, but her body is in a suspended state. Why? Because of the sacred bloodline, the genetics. That's the paragenetic frequencies is like a tuning box. It's just going into the whole planet. And there are other suspended bodies for the same purpose all over the planet, not just Torhana's. But Torhana is kind of special. She's, the mother of Jesus. And by the way, Torhana's bloodline, of course, produced Mary, the mother of Jesus, produced Jesus, produced that family. So she was her own incarnation, later in time. So the significance of Torhana and how she's included with the Black Madonna is because she's the veiled being that's in her sarcophagus. She's very much a frequency of the midnight sun. And she creates the energies that took us up to and through her other incarnation in the same bloodline of, the mother of Jesus. And of course, we're talking about the Virgin Mary again. So there's the Black Madonna in her Virgin Mary in her Black Madonna form. So it's all, put together.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that, for example, the many incidents of saints whose bodies were found to be incorruptible,
Mm-hmm.
that were there to be some trans-dimensional revelation that these bodies that you say are holding this genetic frequency around the planet are, of course, in an incorruptible state?
Well, let me interrupt you.
Or is it a trans-dimensional? It's not that 3D. It's not like, because let me just quickly say the reason I'm asking a background story on this is that it was documented by the officials of Forest Lawn Mortuary in Glendale, California, that the body of Paramahansa Yogananda, for example, one among a number of documented bodies of instances of incorruptibility, manifested no indications whatsoever of decay for weeks. And the only reason they knew this was because there were disciples who were coming from overseas who said, well, please don't inter the body in the crypt until we've had a chance to pay our respects. And they were delayed and they were delayed. And so the mortuary directors had to we got to go check the body because we're going to present it. We don't want anything to be unpleasant. And they're like, oh, it's
perfectly fine.
It's perfectly fine, day after day after day after day after day, no indications of decay.
Yeah.
And a Vedic teacher, a friend of mine, whom I respect very much, said to me that her intuition about this, that if you go to Forest Lawn Mortuary, to the crypt of Paramahansa Yogananda, and it's a beautiful little hall they have, they have different halls where all the crypts are, and there's a meditation bench there. That she said that Yogananda left a very powerful vibration of divine presence in that form that makes it a very powerful place of pilgrimage, to tune in with his universal consciousness. He left that body behind, he's in whatever trans-dimensional place or astral planet, Hiranyaloka, as it is known, above my pay grade to know what that is. But is this somewhat analogous?
Yes, it is analogous.
Describing?
It's not the same exactly because there's levels of this, and for instance, Torhana, it's very close to what Yogananda is in. I would say it's very close to it, but there's so many different levels. Like some of the incorrupted bodies, certain saints and whatever, they're incorrupted in the sense that they're amazingly preserved, but they're a little, they're not quite. They're just.
They couldn't jump up and play basketball.
Right, yeah, and still they are holding a particular vibration. And then, of course, there's somebody like Yogananda. And then, of course, there's somebody like Torhana, who's the Lady of Light. So you have different levels, but they all are connected in the sense that they are giving off, they are shedding the genetic light. And this is the only thing I can call it, because, I've talked about paragenetics and genetics, so I'm not going to go into that again, but the frequencies of the crystalline part of the DNA, that is where it's really at. And that's nothing that anybody really studies in science around, as far as I know, on this planet. They're looking at, the codons, and it's all very interesting. But the crystalline spirals in the DNA is where it is the light function. And so, to some extent, even to the lowest level of incorruptibility, where a finger might have fallen off or something.
They preserve those as relics. It's a great center of profit for pilgrims. We got his finger. Come here, and we'll sell you a tchotchke. You can take it home. Yeah.
But to the point where they're just, like Yogananda and Trina, they're full of light. To one level or another, it is still, to whatever degree, emanating this crystalline DNA light. So this is what keeps us going. Not just that, of course, a lot of things keep us going. One of the things is the grid. You could almost call it a grid of uncorruptible bodies, suspended bodies. It's incorruptible to a point, and then it becomes suspended. There's a certain, difference, but it's basically the same. That are giving us this DNA energy into the planet, keeping that flow going. And, it's probably deeper than I have any idea. I don't profess to know everything about it, but they're giving me information on this in pieces for many, many, many years.
Mm-hmm. So paragenetics, not to go totally down that rabbit hole, but as I understand it, that everybody is tempted to focus on bloodlines and, my ancestor was a Templar, therefore I carry Templar blood, or I'm of the, Merovingian bloodline, therefore I'm descended from Shakespeare and Jesus. And, I've met people like that. And there's nothing wrong with honoring, one's lineage. It's a beautiful thing. And the science of genetics and DNA and everything that's carried with it. But that on the soul level, that, incarnating into a human form through a, fertilized ovum, that there is this flash in the ether, as the sages teach, when there is that moment of conception, and many souls seek that body. To incarnate in that form, and the soul that incarnates is the one that is most vibratorily in line with that mother and father, and that time and place, and that environment, that upbringing, that karma, all of that, and that the soul genetics during the formation of the fetus, the soul karma and genetics that is in the astral spine that comes into that form is a major part of the forming of that fetus, of the genetics of the mother and father interacting with the karma that is locked up in the astral spine. And, and this is how a fetus is formed, from the medulla oblongata outwards. And it's deeper sacred science than I comprehend in its entirety. But that there is, that the soul genetics are this powerful dynamic that is just not understood yet by science in terms of its interaction with its, the hidden dynamic within DNA. Is that a fair description?
Well, yes, but the paragenetics part of it, we've discussed on the show many times how when you come into your incarnation, you also carry your paragenetic lineage, which is from past incarnations. But the good thing about that is you don't carry any of the negative parts. By negative, I mean, downsides. You're carrying only the finest of what you learn, glean, the light you.
Well, that's a relief.
And that's what you bring in paragenetically. Now when you get it in there, you're going to mix it. There's the other genetics, and the other genetics is a mixed bag.
But right, with the physical DNA. Yeah.
Right, but you have the paragenetics. And as Thothus said, the paragenetics, even if you never had a child in your life, you're giving forth that light into whatever family relatives are continuing, cousins, great cousins, second cousins, third cousins, whatever. You're giving that forth because somebody in your family is procreating somewhere, you know.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's also going up the line, and it's giving to your ancestors.
I know, which is so mysterious to me. I mean, that I have difficulty bending my mind around.
Well, I do too, kind of, but you know, we live our true reality. I mean, well, our true being is toroidal. We've created a linear form, and that's why it's so hard. Our minds are thinking linear instead of toroidal. You know,
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that way it would make more sense. But also, to get back to the subject, also paragenetics. Okay, I forgot what the subject was.
Well, we're talking about Torhana
Yes.
in her suspended state, and
Right, suspended state, yes. So also what the paragenetics does is it allows the frequency of the bloodline that has been the physical genetic bloodline combined with the paragenetic frequency combines with the paragenetic frequency to allow the highest levels of the bloodline of the physical DNA to meld with that, and then creates this incredible energy field that in a suspended body, in a incorrupted body, can move out into the field, that whole frequency, that whole experience. It becomes so physical, and that's where we receive that energy from, more than anything, is from that blending of the two. And it comes out in various ways, but also through this incorruptible, suspended kind of state they have. Yes.
So another thing you mentioned are the various orders that down through the centuries have helped support, tune into, facilitate the Terran Lux grid, and through devotion to the Black Madonna, through this active, sentient veneration dynamic, as it's called. And you mentioned the Druids, Templars, Cathars, the Chaldees, Codes, and certain, pagan. I really wish we could come up with a better word than pagan, which is simply Latin for country, and does not at all do justice to the huge spectrum of
it does. I agree.
that it's used to. I mean, I grew up Catholic, and we actually had a thing in my Catholic school, whereas you make a little donation, you can buy a pagan baby. I kid you not. Buy a pagan baby. What that meant was, the missionaries, Catholic missionaries, somewhere in the world, that this is going to help, support the conversion of some pagan child. But,
that's a stream. I've never heard that before.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure there's plenty of Catholics out there of my generation who are going, oh, yeah, I have. It cost me $5 upon a pagan baby. I felt so holy,
Yes, yeah. Right.
Anyway. So yeah, the word pagan. Please.
Well, I know.
Another word.
Well,
anyway, that particularly, of course, for me, with my Templar background and Cathar background, this is very touching and compelling to me. And you've sort of drawn a genetic line here, as we've been talking right now, between Torhana and that, in Albion in the British Isles, at that time, of course, not known as Glastonbury then, but you specifically mention a Celtic, Hebraic, Roman lineage, and that the Grail genetics were carried through the Celtic and Hebraic, and that from that bloodline emerged the Blessed Mother Mary and Yeshua, and then on, Yeshua and the Magdalene, and a child of that union, marrying a child of the union of St. John the Beloved, and I'm forgetting the name of the woman who was the mother, which you mentioned in the video, but and that was the beginning of really what is the Cathar Templar bloodline, which eventually emerged, throughout the Languedoc region in France and elsewhere in northern Spain, Italy, which the Cathar communities of, the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th centuries before they were exterminated by the Vatican. And that you specifically say that there are surviving Catharines who carry on these ceremonies and rituals of this active sentient veneration of the Black Madonna to this day, among us, somewhere unknown. Does anything come in for you to share on that?
Well, first of all, when I received this information, that particular information about the Catharines, that was right after our journey, in 1998. And now I thought, just while I was making this video, I thought, I wonder if I could Google them, if they'd show up, but I couldn't find anything about them. So obviously not. It's spelled like Catherine, but both is pronounced Catharines. And he just says that there are persons that are observing this. Now, I kind of had a feeling, well, I know that some of them are in the hollow earth, because, we're having the ancestors that we speak about that are of all creeds, colors, races, whatever, pretty much are represented in small amounts in the hollow earth, because they were migrators. They migrated in. The star kindred selected them, saying, like the Noah's Ark, they said, hey, things are coming down rather weirdly around here on planet Earth. Would you like to join us? We've, prepared a place for you in the Sacred Hollow. It really only had a few little animals in it. It didn't have much in there, but it was a beautiful place. And he said, come on in here and we'll preserve your bloodlines for humanity, for all of humanity, So that's another way that the DNA is preserved, is through the people of the inner earth, who are us, our relatives. Our DNA is directly linked to them. Now, granted, they have a lot more star genetics. They've been in there a while with their star kindred and whatever, but they're still, they've got, a lot of them have Irish names and Mexican names, and some of them are more New Agey sounding. It's just kind of like we are in that regard. There's a lot of ways they're different too, but anyway, there I go. I got off on this and I forgot what you asked.
Well, no, that's all right. I mean, it's fascinating, and the idea that the genetics are preserved in these bloodlines in the hollow earth, and presumably, could be brought back into the surface bloodlines, through appropriate unions here and there, wherever. I mean, you've shared with me that even though they are our kindred, even though they are human beings, that because a lot of them have more star genetics, they're existing in this transdimensional realm, that, for example, you shared one time that there is an inner earth being who was sent on a mission up top, and is living in Colorado.
Oh, well, there's lots of them.
There's lots of them. I'm sure there's many of them, but this is one particularly known to our circle here. I said, well, where is he? Do you receive him? Yeah, Fort Collins. I said, well, I want to go have coffee with this guy. Could I go meet him, at like a local Starbucks and hang out with this, inner earth being who's up here on some mission? You were like, well, he kind of keeps a low profile. And I mean, this is a human being, but to actually be with him, I remember you told me this, you said, if you were to actually spend like a couple of hours with him, the vibration that he carries, simply because he dwells in the hollow of the inner earth, and it's a higher dimension, and it's hard for them to come up top for this work, because it's, dealing with our world on our denser dimensions and all this interference, that if I were to spend a couple of hours with this guy, that it would mess with my dharma, my sense of my purpose, my direction, my focus, my intent, that I would just like, hey, dude, can I come back down with you? I'm so over this. I feel so good. And talking like, I mean, I had this thing I wanted to do and this dharma and everything. I'm just so over it. Let's go downstairs, right?
Well, yes, and there's other factors involved. I don't know, kind of get off the subject, but it's interesting. And that is that they, the person we're talking about, like myself and like you and some others, we have concurrent lifetimes in the inner earth.
Right.
And wasn't yours, but it was someone we know. And there's a kind of a, I don't know, a dimensional thing
Just
going
a
on.
little too close for comfort. It's a little.
Yeah. And also they don't, he doesn't live in Fort Collins. He lives way outside, that's the
Up in
closest
the
city.
mountains.
Yeah. They don't, come around into the gym and to the grocery. He gets groceries at a little store somewhere, but I mean, they can't be around us that much.
Right.
And they have trouble also with their biological systems he has to go inside and come back every once in a while, or at least in the cavern area, because it's just too much. They actually they have lenses. It doesn't look, you couldn't tell, you can't look at somebody and tell that they have contacts. It's contacts, but it helps them to be able to see in this light. And, if they're sensitive and they hear things differently, and they have to have little hearing thingies.
Well, it's funny. I can't help wondering if I've ever accidentally encountered one. Of course, there are no accidents.
Could have. Oh, certainly you could have, especially in the more out of the way places like Chrystine. But they wouldn't be hanging around in a big city or anything.
Right. They're not hanging out at the cloud station.
They might have a special mission and want to go in really quick and come back out really quick, but they're not your next door neighbor kind of thing.
Right. Okay. Well, let's get back to our focus here.
Yeah.
So you, the Catherine orders are still active in some way, and
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. There, some of them are in the inner earth, but they are also in cavern areas, and some of them are in remote areas where they come to the surface and whatever.
Right, and there are. I like to think that there are manifestations of that stream that are shared with some orders that we might consider to be. For example, there are ongoing Magdalene sisterhoods in the south of France, in the Languedoc region. And one person who has stepped out of what was basically an underground Magdalene sisterhood is Bishop Rosamond Ixfaku Miller in the Bay Area of California, who was raised as a little child in France, and within what was essentially an underground Magdalene order, and was prepared to be one of the first who would step out and share that. She's a beautiful priestess and teacher, and in a beautiful Gnostic sanctuary in Mountain View, California, which you can look up if you want to connect with the. They have beautiful Gnostic Eucharists on Sunday, and they have annually a Gnostic Eucharist dedicated to the memory of the martyrdom of the Knights Templar.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, that's
Did you have something you wanted to say?
That's similar, in a way.
Yeah.
What I'm speaking about, and as you were talking, I was seeing one of the Catherine things located in France, in some area in France, and yet it's by a mountain, and they come and go through there into a nice cavern area, and they come not all the way to the inner earth, but just but they have their outer little function. But it's not open to the public or anything like that. It's just their own.
Right. And is, like, for example, Lourdes in France, is it your sense that, and I think you do mention that it was an ancient holy site, long predating Bernadette, and that it's telluric energies, or is it near a cavern? Is there access to the...
It has cavern. It has caverns, and but it's also very ancient. Veneration of the mother was there, and certain streams of water that cross underneath. And now I'm speaking from the Thothic perspective. I haven't read any of this about all of that, but I do know that Chartres Cathedral, which is another big place, underneath that is historically documented to have the water running, concurrent crossing, and they found some of the caverns, and they found a statue of the Black Madonna in there. And so it's similar in Lourdes, only it's more ancient and it's not revealed. It's something to be discovered, perhaps.
Yeah, another such place is Sintra in Portugal.
Yes.
And for any of you who might have studied the work of Freddie Silva, who is a marvelous scholar, researcher into not just Templar ancient history, but hidden history of ancient sacred history and off-planet dynamics, and well worth, highly recommend the work of Freddie Silva. I've recently read his book, First Templar Nation, which is about the true history of Portugal and how it came to be, and how the Templar order in Jerusalem, which is historically understood, in conventional history, to have been founded in 1118 AD under King Baldwin II and given sovereign patronage as an order of chivalry at that time. Well, this was actually directed from Portugal, and that the Templars existed in Portugal before they were given sovereign patronage in 1118. And that Sintra in particular, which is an area just south of Lisbon, it's this sacred mountain or hill that what Freddie Silva brings out in his book, First Templar Nation, is that this was donated to the Templars almost immediately upon their existence and this was the creation of Portugal as the oldest nation state in Europe that has continually existed. The first Templar king of Portugal donated to the order this sacred hill, which there's evidence of going back thousands of years, sacred to the goddess, and that there are caverns and tunnels, and that the local folklore documents this. And then, of course, in the late 1800s, the richest man in Portugal, who was a Freemason, Templar scholar, created a Templar wonderland, and as part of this hill, with the famous Templar initiation well. And it's a remarkable manifestation of the same dynamic. So Montserrat in Spain, Lourdes, wherever devotees of the Divine Mother gather, be it in India, the many places sacred to Kali or to Lakshmi or to Saraswati, that this just really touches me very much. Fatima, for example, in Portugal, where the miracle of the sun took place. Garabandal in Spain, which has not been accepted by the Catholic Church, but the apparitions there of the Blessed Mother in 1961 through 64 were just extraordinary. And one of the messages she gave, probably the reason the Church did not authenticate the apparitions, was what seems pretty clear to be a warning of what was coming with the pedophilia scandals in the Church, that everyone should pray for the souls of the cardinals, bishops, and priests who were on the road to perdition and taking thousands of souls with them.
Wow,
So the Church was not about to authenticate, despite the miracles, the healings, and it's like just as much as Lourdes and Fatima. But so it's an unspoiled sacred site and a very, very beautiful devotional place. So there are all these places where this active, sentient veneration dynamic, and of course the most important place is in our hearts.
Yes, it is.
That's
to mention Sintra again, of course, that is what Thoth, according to Thoth, it's the main point where the inverted well is. It's the main point where in the pyramidus radius matrix, the matrix that's forming for the planet Earth, that is a preparatory zone for the next step being, of course, the ascension aspect. And this pyramidus radius is not it's very difficult to describe, so I'm not going to try to. But anyway, the point where the holographic field starts being spun and created, and creating the pyramids of light all over the planet, is right there in Sintra. It's the very point, the node of it is coming out of the inverted well. The inverted tower, which is a well. And I remember when I received that, this was like, 2016 or something, maybe 2015, in Kauai, when I was living in Kauai. And he said, there's this point, and I was thinking, oh, I bet you that's in Kauai. That's where it is. That's in Kauai. And I asked him, and he said, it's in Sintra. And I went, where's Sintra? I'd heard the name, but I honestly didn't even know enough about it to know what country it was in or anything about it. Really, it didn't click. I was kind of disappointed. I thought it was always ready for Kauai. Anyway, when I looked it up, I was like, "Ooh, this is really, really, really good."
Right. Well, Portugal is unique in another way in that it was really dedicated from its inception to the divine feminine. The many Templar sites there, the symbology, the sacred science used in their creation is just undeniably, unequivocally, a pre-Christian, ancient, sacred science. And the Blessed Mother Mary is the patron saint of Portugal. She is virtually, up until quite recently, every Portuguese girl child who was born was named Maria. It's like Maria Teresa or Maria Catarina, but this was the veneration of
Wow.
the Blessed Mother that was so powerful there. So, the thing that I always like to bring it back to when all of this marvelously profound information stream comes in is, how we can land it in our hearts and how we can make a difference. And particularly this time is touching to me because I've dedicated a lot of my life to cultivating and expressing in devotional music the reverence for the Divine Mother through my spiritual community with Self-Realization Fellowship and leading kirtan for many years. And I would just really encourage everyone, find your own unique, personal approach to the Divine Mother. Call her the Black Madonna, call her Kali, call her Quan Yin, that expresses your heart so that this active, sentient veneration, first of all, can light up our hearts. And then if you feel drawn to a place of pilgrimage, be it Lourdes or Fatima or Sintra or wherever, that there is great value in pilgrimage. There is great value, and particularly now that you have this knowledge shared here of this Terran Lux grid, literally the light of Earth. This grid where there are these places where our devotion can activate and strengthen the grid while at the same time lighting up our hearts.
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to say about that, Maia?
Oh gosh, we've really covered a lot of territory. I guess not. I just feel that it's helping us to define something that we can get from looking at it from a lot of different perspectives, but it's that of really coming to a place where we can be happy. When I say happy, I just mean really, in the soul. And how do you receive that happiness? Not through money, not through wealth. It helps to have family and loved ones around you, of course, but that's love, But beyond that, it's a signal, it's a presence that comes from the center of the earth that comes through that center to the center of the universe, to the center of the heart of God. And that kind of happiness can't be bought. It can't even be learned. I mean, and people could meditate for a zillion years and not get it. And yet they could meditate, not meditate. They could meditate and get it overnight. Or they could not meditate. They could find some kind of an epiphany that happened to them, and receive it. There's all kinds of ways, but it's all a spirit. And the song goes, "Don't worry, be happy." I love that. If you look it up with what's that?
Bobby McFerrin.
And yeah, and Robin Williams is in it, and they're all dancing around, but they're dancing with.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's so funny, but it's cute, But I love the song. I love the song. Don't worry, be happy. And you might think, oh yeah, that's easy for him to say. I've got these bills and sick child, and and I know it's difficult. It's rough, but there's that inner well of happiness that's inside us, that's natural, that you see it in animals, and you get to see it, in all animals, but we get close up and personal with animals in our home, cats and dogs and birds, and and ferrets and whatever that we have
And
in our home.
children. And
And children, of course, they're naturally happy. They can be unhappy about certain things at moments, but then they're back to their natural state. And that's where we need to find a place that we can at least tap into that once, twice, or three times a day,
yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. And I think exploring the Lady of the Midnight Sun, or any of these topics that has to do with a spiritual core, brings us closer to touching on that light, that frequency, abiding
Yes.
in it.
Yes. And I'm feeling prompted to share here something I don't ordinarily share, and I don't think I have shared on any of our programs before, which is I have written a book about my own devotional journey, which is called Romancing the Divine, subtitle The Art and Science of Falling in Love with God. And I'll tuck in a link here. And it's, a lot of it I'm sharing on the reality of the Divine Mother and my own personal journey of, I need a concept that my intellect can respect in order to lead my heart to the place it is yearning to go.
Mm-hmm.
And before I wrote that book, I came across a chant, which is an adaptation of a Catholic hymn. For those who know the story of Bernadette and have seen the wonderful old film Song of Bernadette, this Catholic hymn is actually in there. It's an Ave Maria, but it is slightly adapted by a Canadian woman who became a Swami, and so, Oh, Beautiful Mother. And I've put it on YouTube. There's a very sweet, simple expression of this chant, which I just offer for those, with whom that resonates. It's a sweet, simple chant on a universal way. Oh, beautiful mother, my heart is on fire. To love you and serve you is all I desire. And so I'll tuck that link into the links below, along with, we'll have the link to the Black Madonna meditation that Maia has created, and the previous Torhana video as well. So with that, Maia, is there a last note you'd like to sound?
No, all I can just say is, don't worry, be happy.
Yeah. I'll go along with that. Bless you all. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. God bless us, everyone. Merry Christmas, Happy Thanksgiving too. Bye for now.